All right, so testing, make sure this is working. Yep. Okay, so now we want to talk about the pagan Christ. Why do I say that? Well, because Jesus, as represented in the Gospels, shares, and I guess also the Book of Acts, shares themes with earlier, maybe contemporaneous, and maybe sometimes later pagan, if they're later, if they occur after Jesus's life, well then you could just strike them from the list because then could demonstrate that these pagan man gods, god men, demigods, sons of God were influenced by Christianity. When what we want to do is show that Jesus shares themes with pagan religions that existed or mythologies that existed before Jesus is supposed to have existed. So, yeah, so let's start. And this is a conversation I had with Microsoft Copilot after we covered the historical Jesuses, and we actually left out one of the historical Jesuses, which would have been Barbara Thiering's representation of Jesus as an Essene, I think. So just another, in this case, a white robe for Jesus, the historical Jesus. But anyway, we're not talking about the historical Jesus now. We're talking about the pagan Jesus. So, ancient figures sharing biographical or cultic themes with Jesus. Below is a matrix-style list grouped by motif. I am not claiming, or motif maybe, I'm not claiming dependence, only documented overlap. A. Gods or heroes conceived by a god or by miraculous conception. So first, we have Perseus from the Greek, who was conceived when Zeus impregnates Danae, I don't know, as golden rain. So was this the first golden shower? A god just impregnated a human woman by peeing on her? Is that what happened? I don't know. I'm mocking. I jest. I kid. Anyway, it's not my monkeys and it's not my circus. Dionysus, also Greek, of the Greek pantheon, I guess, or mythos, born of the mortal Semele, impregnated by Zeus. So what is that? 2 chicks that Zeus has knocked up already? Horus, from the Egyptian, conceived by Isis after Osiris's death, magical conception. Attis, Phrygian, conceived from Nana via, not your Nana, not my Nana, someone else's Nana, via divine seed. An almond or a pomegranate seed, apparently. Zoroaster, later tradition, from the Persian, miraculously conceived by divine agency, post-Achaemenid texts. Augustus Caesar, Roman. So here we're, and I think Augustus Caesar, was he of the Julio-Claudian line? Probably not. Oh, it says he he was the founder and first emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. So that goes right up to Nero. And then after Nero, there's some very short-lived emperors, I think. And then it's the Roman Flavian dynasty. So here we have kind of a prototype then for the Roman Flavian Jesus. Miraculous conception legend via Apollo, and this was imperial propaganda. Almost like the Roman Flavian Jesus was imperial propaganda. But then there's a caution: virgin birth, strictly speaking, no sexual content at all, is rarer. Many virgin claims are divine insemination rather than sexual abstinence. Next, the man-god, god-man, son of God figures. Hercules of the Greek, son of Zeus, divine and human natures. Asclepius of the Greek, son of Apollo, healer, deified after death. Romulus, Roman, son of Mars, founder, deified after death. What happened to Remus? Remus gets the short end of the stick. Pharaohs, Egyptians, sons of Ra by birth theology. Emperors, Augustus and Vespasian, Roman, adopted divi filios status. I imagine that means that they were deified later. Divi filius is a Latin phrase meaning son of a god or son of the divine. It was primarily used as an official title by the first Roman Emperor Augustus Octavian to emphasize his divine lineage and political legitimacy as the adopted son of the deified Julius Caesar. Wow. Interesting. So already Vespasian, who seems to be the Christian father in heaven, he was also apparently in the Roman system also considered a son of a god. After Julius Caesar was assassinated and formally deified by the Roman Senate in 42 BC, he became known as Divus Iulius, the divine Julius. His notice there's no hard J sound there, even in Latin. His adopted son Octavian subsequently used the title Divi Filius. Political purpose, I guess that means divine son. The title was used on coins and inscriptions as propaganda, cementing Octavian's authority as a leader with divine protection and heritage, helping him win the power struggle following Caesar's death. Application: while synonymous with Augustus, the title was also adopted by later Roman emperors to bolster their own status, including Tiberius, Nero, and Domitian. Significance: it was a key element of the Roman imperial cult, which was prevalent in the same regions and times as early Christian movement. So here we have Domitian, who is one of the Roman Flavian dynasty, and he is referred to as son of a god or son of the divine. And didn't it also say that Vespasian was? I think that was back here in Copilot. Yeah, Vespasian apparently had it also, Divi Filio status. So here's where this son of God language comes from the Roman Flavians. See, dying and returning, rising, resurrected figures. This is the most contested category. I will be precise. Osiris, who was killed and dismembered, but then he was reassembled and reigns in the underworld. Not bodily walking return. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but anyway, I'd have to become more versed in the story. Next is Inanna or Ishtar, and perhaps also Astartes and Ashtoreth, I don't know. Killed or hung, revived after 3 days. There's a very close temporal motif there. Adonis, killed, seasonal return with the vegetation cycle. Attis, death and emasculation. He was revived or preserved, variant traditions. Dionysus, Zagreus, torn apart but reborn in the Orphic tradition. Romulus, disappearance, return in apotheosis. His body vanishes. And then finally, Jesus, executed, revived bodily, unique claim of permanent resurrection. Scholars disagree whether dying and rising gods constitute a tight category, but the motif undeniably exists. D. Executed, hung, affixed figures, figure, Inanna, mode, hung on a hook or tree in the underworld. I believe it's Peter who describes. Let me see. Yes, the Apostle Peter describes Jesus being executed upon a tree, Greek xylon, in the New Testament, specifically in Acts chapter 5, verse 30, Acts chapter 10, verse 39, and 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24. This phrase refers to the wooden cross or stake, highlighting a theological connection to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 23, where one hanged on a tree is deemed accursed. Acts chapter 5, verse 30, Peter tells the Sanhedrin, the God of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom you had killed by hanging him on a tree. Acts chapter 10, verse 39, Peter testifies that they slew and hanged on a tree Jesus. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24, he writes that Jesus bore our sins in his own body on the tree. Key contextual details, the Greek word xylon can mean wood, timber, or a tree, and was commonly used to describe the wooden stake or cross of crucifixion. Theological meaning, using tree instead of cross, stauros, emphasizes that Jesus took on the curse of the law, Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23, on behalf of humanity. Not literal botany. It is not a reference to a living botanical tree, but to the wooden instrument of death. But it's strange that he specifically uses that and no one else. So, executed, hung, affixed figures. Inanna, hung on a hook or tree in the underworld. Attis, tied to pine tree. Marsyas, flayed and hung. So he was also flayed. Jesus crucified, hung on a tree. Galatians 3:13. Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is every one that hangeth on a tree. And cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. Here, let me back up. So cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree, and then that goes back to Joshua 10:26. And afterward Joshua smote them and slew them and hanged them on 5 trees, and they were hanging upon the trees until the evening. And it came to pass at the time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, and they took them down off the trees and cast them into the cave wherein they had been hid, and laid great stones in the cave's mouth, which remain until this very day. What? I don't know how I had never seen this before. Of course, there's confusion with translators when they're translating Joshua in the New Testament. They get him confused with Jesus. I think some consider the name Yeshua to be a contraction of the name Yehoshua or Joshua. Others, like who believe that Jesus' name is Yahshua, they see like a direct connection between Yahshua and Joshua. Anyway, but then here, this is strange. We've got 5 trees instead of 3, and then they're all being taken and thrown into a cave with great stones laid over the cave's mouth. Wow, dude. I've never heard anyone make anything out of that before. Maybe you have, but I haven't. These overlaps are symbolic, not juridical, but they exist in mythic language. Betrayed by a close associate. Osiris betrayed by Set, his brother. Hiram Abif, later tradition, betrayed by companions. Balder, betrayed by deception. This is less common, but not unique. I think Socrates. Wasn't Socrates also betrayed? Of course, then you got, Julius Caesar was betrayed. Betrayal by a close associate. It's kind of, if they weren't a close associate, you probably wouldn't consider it betrayal. So if betrayal is going to happen, it's probably going to be by a close associate. And betrayal is not really such a unique thing in human experience. So, it's not, I wouldn't consider it a pivotal point or a tent stake in this comparison, because it's such common human behavior. What is not common human behavior, at least nowadays, is sacramental eating of God or God's body or blood. This is one of the strongest parallels and widely acknowledged. Osiris, bread identified with God's body. Mithraism, bread and wine representing God's flesh and blood. Attis and Cybele, sacred communal meals. Dionysus, wine consumed as God's presence. And then Jesus in the Eucharist, the bread equals the body and the wine equals the blood. Justin Martyr explicitly acknowledged such parallels in the 2nd century, whether to rebut or normalize them. And Justin Martyr, I believe, was pretty well fluent, I think, in philosophy and in pagan mythos or legends, I think. I think he's called one of Christianity's earliest apologists. Let me see. Yes, Justin Martyr, 100 to 165 AD, is widely regarded as one of the earliest and most important Christian apologists. He defended Christianity against paganism and Roman persecution, arguing that Christianity was the true philosophy and fulfilled Greek intellectual traditions, largely through his famous works First Apology and Second Apology. Yeah, I would say that would make him the first apologist. Though it might be argued that Saul of Tarsus, or the so-called Apostle Paul, might have been the first. But the thing is that the early apostles, with Saul of Tarsus styling himself the 13th apostle, he never uses the figure 13, but he styles himself the apostle to the nations, which makes him the 13th apostle if his claim is true, because there were only the 12 apostles, and then along comes Paul. And then there's supposedly congregational apostles, but that's not the same thing, because we're talking about apostles who were sent out by Jesus himself. And, Paul claims that Jesus sent him out as an apostle to the nations. So, salvific suffering or atoning death. Prometheus suffers for humanity. Osiris guarantees afterlife. Attis, fertility through death. And then Jesus' suffering redeems humanity. This is one of the strongest mythic convergences, even where theology diverges. What this comparison does and does not show, it does show Christianity emerged in a dense mythological ecosystem. Many Jesus traits were already intelligible to Greco-Roman audiences. Later theological elaboration tracks known myth-making patterns. It does not show direct plagiarism in every case. It does not show that Jesus must be fictional. It does not show that every parallel is early or exact. Your instinct is sound and supported by evidence. Christianity did not invent its narrative vocabulary. It selected, recombined, moralized, and historicized existing symbolic templates. That conclusion is mainstream in religious studies, even among scholars who affirm a historical Jesus. And then it says, if you want to go deeper, we can investigate some other things. Now, the thing is that the Christian scriptures are retooling the Hebrew Tanakh and arguing that Jesus is a fulfillment of prophecies in the Hebrew Tanakh. And yet the story about Jesus aligns with earlier pagan religious and heroic and historical figures. So that the Jesus, the surface Jesus of the Gospels appeals or would appeal more to pagans than it would to Jews. Now, the Christian scriptures assert that that there were things in the Old Testament, so-called, or the Hebrew Tanakh, that were types and shadows of Christ, and that the law was like a guardian or a tutor or a mentor who led us to Christ. The Christian scriptures rarely cite any of these pagan deities or godmen or man gods or heroes or what have you as types and shadows of Christ, even though these are obviously types and shadows of Christ, whereas what you find in the Hebrew Tanakh that the Christian scriptures quote or paraphrase so loosely aren't types and shadows of this pagan Christ. Now, why might these pagan deity stories be something not so appealing to Jews? Well, it's because in the law, the Jews are commanded not to investigate how non-Israelites worshipped their gods, because those gods are off limits, forbidden to the children of Israel, who already have a God, and that God performed mighty wonders for them in bringing them out of Egypt and so forth. So, and of course, you have the Shema that explicitly says that the Creator, represented by the divine name with the tetragrammaton, is their God, and their only God, their God alone. Like it's as Muslims say, he has no deputies, he has no sidekicks, he he has no, there are the angels, but the angels are just messengers. He doesn't have any secondary or tertiary gods hanging about with him. He doesn't have like any god progeny hanging out in heaven with him. He doesn't have any rival gods in existence. That's what the Shema says to the children of Israel, and it's what Islam asserts quite reasonably as a monotheistic faith. Christianity, however, aligning with all of these pagan gods and man gods and god men and sons of God, etc., and heroes, it does believe that you can have more than one god. It does believe that gods can sire child gods, or that you can have hybrid man god, god men, offspring, etc. So, yeah. So when we look at Jesus and the themes running throughout his story or narrative, he's not all that unique or special. He's someone who's very recognizable to pagans. And it wouldn't have been so much of a leap for them to believe in the Jesus of the Christian scriptures, especially when he was feeding into their prejudices against Jews with all of his anti-Semitisms in the Gospels. So yeah, it's curious that the Christian scriptures can spend so much time trying to retool Judaism or retool the Torah and the prophets in order to somehow prove that this pagan Christ was really the Christ that they were expecting all along, the Christ Messiah or Messiah Christ or Messiah anointed one, whatever, that they were expecting all along. But yet the Christian scriptures kind of don't want to mention how their Christ bears so many similarities to these pagan divine deity figures, these hybrids and these children of gods and so forth. They never appealed to these myths as support for Jesus. Maybe because they know that the pagan mind is already going to be able to draw the likeness, and maybe just like when you're shopping for a car and you've already had one car that has turbo and you're shopping for a new car and it also has turbo, oh, well then I want to buy that car because I really liked the turbo in my old car. Meanwhile, the Jesus of the Christian scriptures has failed to really prove his messiahship according to Jewish requirements. So he's done lots of the things that were never asked of him as a Messiah, but then he's not done the things that he were expected of him as a Jewish Messiah. For those things, we're supposed to wait for him to return, something he hasn't done for 2,000 years. And yeah, you have to ask yourself, how long really are Christians duty bound to wait for him to finally show up and prove himself? What is taking him so long? What is he doing up there? Typically, the Christian scriptures say that he's making, I suppose, God's enemies a footstool for his feet. And then you have to wonder, well, if you're a divine ruling king, what is taking you so long to do that? Because meanwhile, we on earth could really use a reigning king of peace on earth. You know, peace on earth would kind of be nice, right? We'd kind of like to have that. And yet, it's one of the main things that Christianity has not delivered. Despite the fact it's one of the most necessary things in the world.